House of Wax is a film from 2005 and is a remake of an original House of Wax that came out, I'm not sure when, but I believe sometimes in the 60s probably. And I believe Vincent Price was in it, but again, I'm not 100% sure on that. I do know that Paris Hilton is infamous for this one, and for that reason alone, this film got quite the negative reviews. Back in the mid 2000s, from what I remember, and onwards. This is more of an infamous classic that grew in popularity over time, and for good reason, because it is actually a pretty decent slasher if we're talking about modern slashers, and it's one of the better 2000s films, in my personal opinion, that are bombarded with cliches of that time. um, you get your cliches of every decade, and the 2000s it definitely had its own set of cliches, but I'd say this is one of the better ones for sure. So, like I said, it is a remake, and it's a very heavy 2000s remake of the classic, and I've never seen the classic, so I cannot compare the two. I cannot say which one is better. I can just say that my experience with this film is pretty much the same with everybody's. I didn't enjoy it a whole lot when it came out. I was also much younger. I was a teen. I I bought into the whole Paris Hilton sucks thing, even though she really doesn't do that bad of a job in this film for what she's given to do. I mean, she delivers her performance. She's always in a freaking tracksuit or a sweatsuit, which she pretty much is in real life anyway. It was directed by Jaume Collet Serra. I'm not familiar with his work on anything else, really, pretty much, but it also is a Dark Castle production, partially anyway. They're known for producing Ghost Ship and the remake of House of Haunted Hill, and probably some other movie. 13 Ghosts, I'm pretty sure they were involved in. Other films like that here and there that came out around that era. This is also a Scream Factory release, which I think it came out like probably 2 years ago already, but you got the original DVD cover, or DVD artwork, you should say, and then the newly revamped Scream Factory artwork, which I really, really like. But you can never beat that classic one, can you? But plot-wise, we have six friends. We have Paige and Blake. Paige is played by Paris Hilton, and they're a couple. And then we've got Wade and Carly, and they're also a couple. And then we've got Nick, who is played by Chad Michael Murray. One hit wonder, pretty much, or a few hit wonders. It's just you never really hear of the guy today. So he was like hot for a minute, and then he kind of just disappeared. He plays Carly's brother, and he's more of like the rebel, badass kind of wrong side of the tracks kind of guy compared to Carly, who's more of like the good girl and the one who's pursuing more in school and career and all that. And then we've got this guy named Dalton, who is completely random out of the six. He's just there, and his whole character is just about being there. And he's a solo single guy who's the desperate, I wouldn't say virgin, but definitely the desperate guy after pussy, that's for sure. They're on their way to a football game, and they're driving, and then they decide to camp out in the middle of the night because they're sick of driving. It's going to be a while anyway. And they decide to basically camp out on the side of the road, essentially. And they kind of start having a party. They kind of start drinking. We start to kind of get to know the characters a little bit more. Dalton and Nick pretty much are not the greatest, most likable people in the world. There's a scene at the beginning of the film where this homeless man asks for change, and they just end up kicking his cup and telling him to get a job. So they're kind of dicks. They're kind of assholes. The characters aren't meant to be liked very much. I think that's kind of done on purpose. Other than Carly, she's probably my favorite and certainly the hottest girl in the film for sure. She's also kind of the lead, and she also ends up kind of being the final girl. Anyways, during this camp out, this truck randomly shows up with like bright headlights, and the kids start freaking out, and Nick throws a bottle at the truck and ends up breaking the headlight of it. And eventually the truck fucks off, and they end up going to bed. But in the morning, there's a part missing from one of the cars, and like one of the guys is missing his camera and stuff like that, and just there's confusion all over the place. And then this guy shows up in a truck, in another truck. It's a different truck, but they're wondering if it's the same truck. This guy ends up being like a really redneck looking guy with like bad teeth and just really dirty, nasty looking. And he's throwing this dead deer onto a pile of other dead deers and just like dead animals pretty much. It's in the middle of the forest, and it's causing this ridiculous smell that they end up smelling all night, but they don't know what it is until they find this pile of dead animals. And then here's this guy throwing another deer onto it, and in the middle of the pile too, there's this hand coming out of the mess, and they're all freaking out. And then this redneck guy goes to investigate the hand, and then he pulls it out, and it ends up being like a wooden hand from a mannequin. And he's like, "It's not real, see?" Or whatever. But one of the guys, the guys who needed the part for the car that was missing, I wrote the thing down, but just something in the something that the car needs to run, basically. He ends up offering them a ride to town. So Wade and Carly, who are a couple, end up going with this redneck-looking guy, and they end up in this kind of creek thing where he needs to put the truck on four-wheel drive to get through, to get to the town. They stop trusting him. They bail. They just say, "Okay, you took me far enough." They end up walking the rest of the way, and then they end up in this town called Ambrose. And this town is really, really, really tiny, but it has its like main spots and attractions. Like, it's famous for this wax museum, so there's the wax museum there. It has this one chapel or church in there. It has, you know, a few shops here and there. It has like one gas station. But everything is so minimal and condensed and tiny. Like, it's a really tiny abandoned town, essentially, which we find out later once the story starts developing a lot more. But they're exploring the town. They go into the church, and this guy named Bo comes out of it claiming that there's a funeral, and he starts freaking out that they just interrupted the funeral. And Wade mentions that all he needs is a part for the car, and that then they'll be pretty much on their way. So this guy, Bo, apologizes to them and tells him that after the funeral, he can drive the two of them to his house where he has the part available because he owns the gas station that's in the town, or he claims to own the gas station that's in the town. So when they get to the house, Carly stays in the truck and Wade goes inside. And of course, this guy named Bo, who owns the house, goes to the washroom, and Wade starts to snoop around, which is a huge cliche in horror movies, but especially from this era in general. Because who goes into a person's house who already is acting slightly sketchy to begin with, and he's already doing you a favor, and you just start snooping around and like exploring the place and making yourself at home and figuring out, like, you know, like looking at everything and touching everything? Like, do you want to cause more issues than it seems like you're in already? Like, fuck sakes. But he does, and he starts exploring, and then here comes another guy that has a wax face on, and he attacks Wade, of course, and then you get your first kill kind of the film, where this guy is covered in wax head to toe, paralyzed first, so he can't even move, and then he's turned into a wax figure alive. It's fucked. It's really disturbing the way, like, everything that is done to him, and it has this sick vibe to it, and it's really creepy, but it's really disturbing the way they do it. Like, really disturbing. And then outside, Carly's still in the truck, and she's getting a little bit impatient, but as soon as she gets out of the truck, she realizes the broken headlight. So she realizes that it's the same truck that was being sketchy the night before coming into where they were camping out. So she gets the impression that this guy is not who he says he is. She starts honking the horn. He comes out. There's this like altercation. She does end up getting away from the guy, but Wade is dead at this point. It was a fan belt that Wade was looking for, by the way. It was pissing me off. I was trying to find it in my notes, but I found it. Fan belt for the car. Anyways, Carly gets away. She ends up going back to that church, and this is where everything kind of starts to get revealed in the town slowly. The church is filled with people, and it's filled with like this recording of funeral music and organ music and even talking and stuff like that. So the whole church is designed to be like a monument of like wax figures. And the one thing I was wondering throughout the whole film, and I still wonder, is how many of these people are alive and dead? Because Bo and another killer who's named Vincent, they're basically brothers. What happens is they were Siamese twins and they were split when they were babies, and then they basically grew up psychos. So Vincent is the one who basically does most of the killings and does most of the sculpture work, and Bo is more of the one that lures people into town and leads them to their death, pretty much their demise in being turned into wax figures. But what I'm wondering is how many are dead wax figures, like the figures that are in whatever positions they put them in, and how many are alive? Because when Wade was turned into wax, he was alive, and he was still alive as a wax figure because the character Dalton finds him eventually when Dalton and Nick come into town as well, because eventually Wade and Carly are taking forever to get back to camp, so Nick and Dalton go into town and split up. Nick goes to the gas station where he eventually finds Carly, who was captured by Bo after this whole church situation. And Dalton finds Wade, and Wade is wax. He's completely paralyzed. His face is like the only thing he can move is his eyes. And Dalton tries to take the wax off of him, and when he does, it peels his skin. But he's completely paralyzed, and he can barely like make a sound. So I'm sure he can feel all the pain because you can tell that his face is literally being ripped apart. Like his cheeks are being ripped off, like to the point where you can almost see bone. And he's alive through this whole thing, which is fucked. It's so disturbing to think about. This film adds so much like darkness and what's the term that used? Fuck. Mean spiritedness. This film is very, very mean spirited. So I'm just wondering how many of those wax figures are people who are still alive and conscious while they can't move, and how many are just actual dead corpses. Because the brother's mom in the coffin at that church is dead, and I think they wanted to build this whole small town of wax figures basically around her, and they wanted to like preserve this town as like a frozen town in time kind of thing. That's their whole sick goal kind of thing. And they do that by luring strangers into this town, which is not even on a map. At the end of the movie, one of the sheriffs states that this town is completely abandoned after the closing down of a sugar factory or something, and nobody knows about the town because it's not even on a map. So these two brothers, it's a ghost town. Like nobody searches for this town. Nobody knows it's like barely anybody knows it even exists. So that's how these two brothers, Vincent and Bo, end up getting away with these kidnappings and turning these these innocent people into their personal puppets kind of thing, or wax figures, you should say. But it just plays off like a slasher, like a typical slasher formula. It doesn't reinvent the wheel or anything like that when it comes to slasher movies, but it definitely does have interesting ideas to it, and does take a direction here and there that it's like a breath of fresh air. You don't necessarily see it all the time in every slasher film. Paris Hilton's death for it's great. It's very reminiscent, as a matter of fact, of Friday the 13th, the final chapter, part 4, when Jason falls onto the machete and has it go like up, up, up until he hits the ground, like through his eye. It's kind of the same thing, but on the forehead. She gets a like a javelin or something like that right through the forehead, and then she falls, and her head is slowly like going down and down the shaft. and I'm sure they took inspiration from Friday the 13th Part 4, the final chapter for sure on that scene, because that's what it reminded me of. There's a movie theater scene which plays out kind of the same as the church scene did, where there's these wax figures watching a movie, and the movie is pre-recorded to play at a certain time, or when somebody walks through the door, or when the door is open, it signals the projector to start playing the movie, and it's just a whole creepy atmosphere. And Bo, at this point, is searching the movie theater for Carly, who's pretending to be a wax figure in the seats herself. And Nick comes in, her brother, and at this point he has a crossbow, and he saves the day by shooting down fucking Bo. And then they both escape back to the wax museum. It's called Trudy's Wax Museum. Trudy was the mother of these two twins, and she was a wax sculptor herself until Vincent started to get sick and twisted and wanted to create his own version of a wax museum in a wax town. And then there's this whole fire situation. The whole place gets lit on fire. You realize that the whole fucking wax museum is made of wax, like the walls and the ceiling and everything. So the whole place starts to melt. There's scenes where the two are like falling through the floor. They get the upper hand over Bo, at least Nick does. And Carly ends up getting the upper hand eventually over Vincent. And of course, there's another trope where she's like, you're not." What does she say to him? You're not the freak. You're not the freak, bro. Bo, your brother is. Bo's the freak. You're not the freak. Don't worry." And she's trying to like sympathize with him and try to calm him down and make him not kill her and everything, but that got a little bit cheesy, and that got a little bit cliche-ish when it comes to these kinds of horror movies. But like I said, she ends up getting the upper hand on him too, and then the whole fire melts the place down technically, and then you have both of them survive, so it's not really a final girl, it's her and her brother, and that's about it. And then there's this really really silly twist at the end that just, it's kind of sudden and it's kind of pointless. Somebody tells the sheriff that they ran a blood test or something, and apparently it wasn't two sons, it was three. And then one of the final shots, it shows that redneck that gave them the ride into town originally. So even though they freaked out, and when they told this guy that they just wanted to walk and they didn't want to ride anymore, he took offense, and he's like, "I was just trying to do something nice for you, and every time you do, yeah, I bet you appreciate it. I bet you do." And he was starting to get all pissy and stuff. So you kind of sensed that he was not really a bad guy. He was literally just trying to do them a favor because he didn't try to hurt him or anything. But the movie suggests that he's the third son, so it's kind of a cliffhanger, but it's also kind of pointless because he kind of just waves and then that's it. So you're just left to assume that he's evil, but he never did anything evil throughout the film. So unless he's like the good son, which then it doesn't leave much of a twist for more bad things to happen because he's just gonna live in this town by himself, I guess, since his two brothers are dead. I don't know. It's half-assed. Like they didn't explain, or they didn't give they didn't give enough of a hint to suggest what would happen after the credits, or they didn't leave you much to assume, kind of thing, I found. And then they end off with the credits with Helena by My Chemical Romance, which is awesome. Awesome track selection to end off a film like this, and totally, again, brings you right back to the 2000s. I mean, I used to listen to My Chemical Romance like crazy back in the day, a lot of emo bands. When I was an emo kid myself, and I've still got that in my blood a little bit. But yeah, ending off with Helena by My Chemical Romance is a great way to end off the House of Wax remake, and great seeing Paris Hilton in one of her only horror roles, I think. And like I said, for everybody who picks on her and everybody who picked on her, she really doesn't do that bad of a job. Even Chad Michael Murray, who again was here for like a little while in everything, but you never hear about him anymore. He was great too. He played his part awesome. And Carly, I didn't look up any of the actors or actresses outside of knowing those two, Chad Michael Murray and Paris Hilton. but a lot of them look familiar by face, and Carly was one of them. I cannot believe I did not recognize Alicia Cuthbert as Alicia Cuthbert playing Carly. I am such a fucking idiot. She is such a recognizable face, and I didn't recognize her. Fuck, Tex. Wade 2. If I'm not mistaken, because I didn't look him up, I think Wade is in the Friday the 13th remake. The guy who's looking for his sister with the longish hair. I think it's him. That's who, like, his face looks similar to him, but I could be wrong. And Carly also looks familiar by face, but I have no idea where else I would have seen her, or what her name is. So apologies for not looking up these actors or actresses before this review, but I will after. Anyways, like I said, very, very enjoyable slasher. This is a good. It might be 3.5, but it also could very well merit and deserve a 4 out of 5, just because of how dare I say intelligent it is. I mean, it works very intelligently, and even with the kills, like when Wade, before he gets like waxed up and turned into a wax figure, like the way Vincent cuts his ankle is disgusting to look at. Like it's really cringe what they do with the kills and all that, and how far, not how well, how far they go, but like just the detail and what they put in your head. Like it's the thinking about the pain that I found the most disturbing in this film, instead of just showing you everything. They make you think a lot about, like, psychologically, about how painful everything would be and how disturbing everything would be. Like if you're conscious but you're paralyzed in covered in wax and you can't move, like how fucking claustrophobic that would be. It's just insane. But anyways, like I said, I really want to watch the original to compare, because I've never seen the original. But anyways, I'm not going to go too much longer. I mean, I could talk about this film for an hour, but I won't, because you don't want to listen to me talk for an hour. So it's a fun movie though, and I recommend it, and go check it out because it's a lot of fun. House of Wax from 2005. It's a blast for a slasher film. Subscribe to Morgan Film Fan if you'd like to listen to my voice, or if you'd like my film reviews. I'll be back with more soon, so stay tuned for that. And check out what's on the channel already. And until next review, have a good one. Take care and cheers.